Hello everyone. I wanted to go over some writing projects, and they're kind of eclectic from fiction to nonfiction, and a little bit of the review. My book Wooden Wonders came out, and this was a real interesting project that went on a long time, and it's from UTM Academic Press, and they did a good job with it. And if you linger to the end, I'll tell you a little more about what I hope that would lead to. And then I have new book out, Weirdness and Whimsy, Short Stories and Poetry. And this is a collection of short stories I wrote and poems, and it's very eclectic, and if you linger, I'll do a reading from it. And then this just came out. These are both 2024 Code Finder. This is the fourth in a series of these Finder books. And this one, Dan, the youngest, is traveling with his father. And it starts in Guatemala, moves into Mexico, through the Caribbean, over to West Africa. And anyway, very interesting book. I think it's meant for teenagers, so I won't read from that, but that just came out. Happy with that. Worked on that a long time. And Tense Design, I've changed it a bit. There's some additions to this. This has been around since 2018, but a little new revision. And then I recently wrote a paper, Engineering Art, Democratizing Creative Expression Using Normative Rules, and that was a project I mentioned on earlier YouTube that I didn't submit, and then I reworked it and I ended up liking it. So it's a lot about art and music and engineering art and music. And then finally, for the World Design Organization, Anthropological Methods in Design. That just came out last year. So that's kind of what I've been up to. And I thought it'd be interesting to do, maybe I'll look at this. And then I was going to do a little bit of the reading. So I've been doing a lot of writing lately. My design work most recently is with a medical device, and I'm actually working with students with that, so that's neat. So it's just starting, it's kind of started, but it starts in earnest next week. So that's kind of what I've been doing there. Otherwise I've been writing. But Wooden Wonders, I just thought I wanted to do two things here, and this little video is sort of the kind of get back on YouTube type of affair. So my dream for this was that we could make the keel bar, the structural parts of these boats, from something besides the wood that they're using as Chengal, because that's not sustainable. And there's so many wonderful artisanal elements connected with working with it. I thought it'd be really nice to preserve that, and I guess I could go on at length with this, but I won't. So I thought it'd be neat to have a hybrid of their traditional boat building techniques with some other techniques that used modern materials that were more sustainable than that tropical hardwood. So the traditional boat builders and the people who use them would still have the same connection with what they had once done, but I haven't found any money for that. So anyway, that's a dream though, and that was a big dream, one I lose sleep on thinking about, but it did not come forward. And I don't know really how to make that go forward. And my idea anyway, was to separate this large structural work, which uses old growth timber, from the more, I'll say, skill laden finishing work, the planking and that sort of thing, which can use younger trees. But that was that. And then I was going to read this. And I think that's really all I wanted to go over. I was going to do a reading from this, and And I guess before I do that, the work in art and music and AI that I've been doing, that's kind of out there. And I'm actually in the music studio here that kind of evolved from that in a way. And it's just a very interesting time when people are having greater access to presenting art and music and other creative forms through AI and other techniques. I am not of that school. In fact, it's funny because like in this book, Code Finder, I have a statement in here that all the writing, I did it in another book, which I don't have here, another book I wrote. I put a statement in here, none of it was generated or assisted by AI, and I am part of the group that's looking at digital authentication and some kind of watermarking for original works. I embrace AI completely, and I've talked about that in other videos, but there does need to be some authentication of who's doing what. So I was going to read a chapter from this. and I'll stop it there. So this is very eclectic, this book. Includes, like I say, poetry, which is unusual for me. But I was going to read one short story. I have short stories, very short stories, children's stories, and poetry all in this book. So Weirdness and Whimsy it's called. And this is called Moloch Rages. Moloch slipped through the crack in the curtain. It had been pulled open for only a moment. He saw his prey, the man sitting on a rock. The man was about to walk around and explore. Moloch laughed at the sweetness of this prowling time through the curtain. The man was his toy and his meal. The man walked, feeling the dirt under his feet, the pricks of pain mixed with satisfying sense of liberty. He would now be able to go into the forest. Its smooth limbered trees and cooling shadows invited him. The shadows of the giant tree limbs and green leaves touched his skin and dappled the sky. He walked further into the forest. A chill descended in the dense shadows. The forest had quickly become a tangled mass of limbs and roots which were sucking unnameable juices from the gnarled soil, where the leaves soaked in the fiery air of the burning sky, and the wind lifted the debris on the forest floor and ground it up into splintered dust. But he was free, and there must be more to see. The forest flooded and pained his senses, but it promised to reveal his potential. Moloch waited in the trees. The man walked carefully, enjoying his freedom from the rock as he scraped against the scratchy bark from trees huddling around him. He pushed away barbed branches and breathed in the dark, humus-borne dust. It burned sweetly in his throat. The clawing roots were scratching his feet, and it was getting cold and damp. The tweaks of pain livened up his senses and whipped the dullness of the rock. He stepped on a spiny-edged thorn. It pierced his foot near the joint on his big toe. He yelled out in pain and reached down to remove it, but he had taken another step on the thorn and forced it deeply into the joint. He limped in pain. The dust was no longer raw and wild. It was clogging his nose and his throat. He felt a thickening that made the air lose its smell and forced his lungs to work harder as he drew the splintered dust deep into his lungs. He sat down on a root. He slid off and got jabbed by a broken tree trunk, its splinters digging into his sides. This pain was less than his foot pain, so he sat there with his weight off his foot, hoping the foot pain would relent. There, Moloch jumped and strangled the man's mind. Passions turned into poison, love turned into lust, labor turned into loss. The man's mind became ripped with images. Pain radiated everywhere, and he couldn't breathe. His eyes widened, and he covered his head with his arms. Moloch roared. His breath smelled like the burnt oil that was sacrificed to him. He kicked the man violently in the back, and he fell head first into the forest floor. His face plowed into a rotted, reeking Asherah pole. The lingering splinters pierced his eyes. Putrid, rancid fruit reeking of death was driven up his nose. The defilement of his senses was complete. A tiny ember in him whimpered, "Be gone!" He shook his head and called out, "Help me!" The hot wind ripped through the forest and cleansed the air. The wind washed away everything from his body. He could see, he could smell, he could hear. His lungs were free, and he could smell jasmine in the dry air. Even the thorn deep in his foot was removed. He could walk. He walked, and then he ran, back to the rock. Healed and full of breath, he looked at the forest with piercing, hate-filled eyes. Then he smiled. Moloch raged in his own name as he was thrown back behind the curtain. He snarled at Dagon and Asherah as they thrust daggers into his throat. They laughed at his pain, and he pulled the bleeding daggers out of his neck. Moloch settled a moment and glared at them. Chemosh came up behind Moloch and punched him in the eye. Moloch roared in agony as Chemosh laughed. Moloch looked at Tammuz desperately. Tammuz grinned, snorted, and kicked Moloch in the stomach. Astarte came behind Moloch and twisted his head while Baal chewed on Moloch's exposed neck. The curtain merely wiggled as they all stepped back laughing, leaving Moloch to heal in agony and shame. So that's one of the stories. There's happy stories. There's one about a dog going out with his master. The master's not named. It's all about the dog. And there's other things that are really varied. I won't read any more to you, but anyway, those are some of the latest projects I've been working on. Thank you.